Imagine waking up in a completely different state with a new name, a new family, and absolutely no memory of the first 27 years of your life. In 1985, Jody Roberts vanished without a trace just days after digging into a story about alleged police corruption. See, she was an investigative reporter for the Tacoma News Tribune. For 12 agonizing years, her family and colleagues assumed she'd been murdered to keep quiet. But the truth turned out to be far stranger. 12 years later, Jody was discovered living 2,000 miles away in a remote Alaskan fishing town. She was going by the name Jane D., and she was happily married with 2 sets of twins. She was suffering from a profound case of amnesia that caused her to not even know her own parents. Today, we're diving into one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. A case that blurs the line between a terrifying medical anomaly and a sinister cover-up. Did Jody's mind just undergo a rare dissociative fugue state, completely shattering her identity to protect her from some unknown trauma? Or did she intentionally stage her disappearance, empty her bank accounts to flee a dangerous situation involving the subjects of her investigations? This is a rabbit hole that goes deep, and there's conflicting evidence that will have you questioning everything. Let's get spooky. The rainy industrial skyline of Tacoma, Washington in 1985 is the backdrop for this story about a woman who appeared to be the quintessential investigative reporter. Jody Roberts was 27 years old, a police beat journalist for the Tacoma News Tribune who had carved out a space for herself in a demanding, high-stakes job environment. She had a reputation for being a relentless worker. Her colleagues noted that she ate, drank, and breathed reporting. She had an intensity, an obsession with the truth. Yet on May 20th, 1985, this master storyteller would become part of a story herself. Her story would span 3 states, multiple identities, and a psychological mystery that continues to challenge the boundaries of what we know about psychiatric science. The disappearance of Jody Roberts is a missing person case that tells us about the reality of the Pacific Northwest media and law enforcement in the 80s. She failed to meet a photographer for an assignment at Pacific Lutheran University, and immediate concern began among her peers because she would never miss that type of appointment. Her peers began to be afraid, and that fear was rooted in the stories that Roberts was going after. She was reporting on stories about serial killers, government corruption, and high-ranking law enforcement officials. They would discover her 1970 Toyota Corolla in a parking garage near the newspaper office 2 weeks later, and that just made the story stranger. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no ransom notes. There was just an empty car and a missing woman who seemed to have evaporated into the Puget Sound mist. Jody Roberts was in a pressure cooker of a professional environment. Tacoma was a city on edge, gripped by the terror of the Green River Killer. The Green River Killer was actively stalking and murdering women across the region. And Roberts was actively interviewing women sex workers who fit the targets of the Green River Killer. She was searching for leads that the police might have missed. And this placed her in direct contact with some of the most dangerous elements of society at a time when the killer was unidentified and could have been anybody. Beyond the Green River Killer investigation, Roberts was entangled in a dispute with Captain Mark French of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. Allegations had surfaced involving French's alleged drug use on his personal boat, a story that Roberts was writing and was going to publish. In a declaration filed years later, a former deputy named Mike Golder claimed he witnessed French threatening Roberts on March 4th, 1985, because she intended to run with the story. French has consistently denied threatening her, saying that he only requested a pre-publication interview. But the timing had an implication. Roberts vanished just 2 months after this confrontation. These professional pressures were made worse by a deteriorating personal state. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, those close to Roberts noticed that she started acting differently. She began drinking more heavily and neglected her personal appearance, signs that many psychologists might identify as a precursor to a major dissociative event or a total psychological collapse. But despite these red flags, she continued to work with a frantic energy until the day she simply stopped. The mystery of Jody Roberts is discussed as 2 possibilities. Either she was a victim of foul play, or she was a woman who walked away from her life. The evidence that she had made a planned departure from her life is interesting, but only circumstantial. 5 days before she disappeared, Roberts took her beloved cats to the Humane Society, an act that many would consider final arrangements for her dependents. After that, she withdrew $350 from a Federal Way branch of her bank, emptying her bank account. She had been recently denied a request for a vacation, suggesting a desperate need for a break that was being ignored by her employers. However, the problem with the walk-away theory is that it doesn't account for where she was eventually found. On May 25th, 1985, 5 days after going missing in Tacoma, a woman was discovered wandering the Aurora Mall near Denver, Colorado. She had no identification, no luggage, and no memory of who she was or how she had traveled over 1,000 miles in less than a week. She would name herself Jane D, and she appeared to be in what was called a dissociative fugue. This is a condition characterized by sudden, unexpected travel away from home, an inability to recall one's past, and the frequent assumption of a new identity. Some people suspected she simply staged her own disappearance to escape the stress of the newsroom, but medical professionals who treated her in Colorado were convinced of her amnesia. During her 4-month stay in the Denver area hospital, psychiatric teams attempted to penetrate her memory loss using sodium amidol, a sedative that people call truth serum. It's supposed to lower psychological defenses and allow the retrieval of repressed memories. Even though she was under the influence of this drug, she remained a blank slate. She couldn't provide a name, a hometown, a single detail about her life as a reporter. The fact that this drug didn't work gives weight to the idea that her amnesia wasn't a ploy, but she was having a significant failure of her memory. She had no idea who she was or where she came from. So the woman in the Denver hospital began the process of self-invention. She took on the name Jane D and set about building a life from the ground up. She initially worked as a waitress at a fast food restaurant to support herself while enrolling in the University of Denver. She chose to study Russian, a language she had no prior connection to when she was Jody Roberts. And she was a good student. In 1989, Jane D moved to Sitka, Alaska. Sitka, Alaska has approximately 8,500 people. It's the type of town that offers the kind of social isolation that you might seek if you wanted to have a new identity. In Sitka, her life changed. She married Dan Williams, a commercial fisherman, and became the mother of 4 children, 2 sets of twins. She also established a successful web design company, Pongo Computer Works, showing that while her memory, her life story was gone, her skills and intelligence were intact. According to her neighbors in Alaska, Jane D was an extraordinary person and dedicated mother. She was a fixture of the community, active in her business and her family life. However, her new life began to have hardships. In 2001, she became legally blind due to macular degeneration. She learned assistive computer technology and eventually joined the board of directors for Southeast Alaska Independent Living to become an advocate for the disabled. This shows that she still had that drive to investigate, to help, even if she was no longer Jody Roberts. The discovery of Jane D's true identity was a combination of curiosity and a renewed media cycle. In 1997, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department was undergoing a transition. Mark French, the captain who had been accused of threatening Roberts 12 years earlier, was up for confirmation as the new sheriff. This brought Roberts' name back into headlines as critics of French used the disappearance to question his character. At this time, a sheriff's office intern named Paul Meir was conducting a routine review of nearly 200 cold cases. Most of these cases were easily closed due to the subjects being found in jail or deceased, but Roberts' file stood out because of a lack of clues. She had never used her social security number or contacted her family once since 1985. The renewed media coverage included a widely circulated photo of Roberts, and it would reach a woman in Alaska who had worked with Jane D. On July 7th, 1997, this witness contacted the Kings County Sheriff's Office, providing the tip that would solve a 12-year mystery. The phone call that followed was surreal. When detectives informed Jane D that she was actually Jody Roberts, she was in complete shock. She had lived for over a decade under her new life that had begun in that Colorado mall. On July 15th, 1997, she spoke with her parents, Jim and Marilyn Roberts, for 2 hours. And despite the fact that the call had a lot of emotional weight, she did not recognize their voices, nor did she remember any aspect of her 27 years in Oregon and Washington. Her sister observed that she was overwhelmed and in shock, facing the impossible reality that she had a mother, a father, and siblings that she didn't know. The discovery of Jody Roberts went wild in the media. Almost immediately after her identity was confirmed, Roberts found herself at the center of a bidding war for her life story. She hired a high-powered Hollywood agent from the International Creative Management and a book agent in New York City. Reports surfaced that she was offered as much as $100,000 for movie of the week deals. The fact that her trauma became commercialized became a thing for people who were skeptical of her amnesia. Skeptics argued that her savvy management of media deals was inconsistent with a woman suffering from profound psychological impairment. But her producer, Michael McCarthy, defended her actions, saying that Roberts was very upfront about the issue of money. She wanted to use the proceeds to move her family even further into the Alaskan bush, away from the prying eyes of the public. The media strategy included a high-profile appearance on the tabloid show American Journal and a planned Christmas reunion at Disneyland. Oh, how nice. Where her Alaskan husband and children would meet her original family for the first time. And the event was televised, turning a deeply private meeting into a public spectacle. And the irony was not lost on her former colleagues. The woman who had spent her career investigating the secrets of others had now sold the rights to her own secret life. The psychiatric community remains divided on the Roberts case, as there's no definitive medical test to prove or disprove a claim of amnesia. Dr. Gary Tucker of the University of Washington noted that while amnesia is one of the least understood afflictions, a 12-year loss of identity is highly unusual and typically involves other neurological symptoms that Roberts didn't have. Other experts have cautioned against making conclusions based on tiny amounts of facts, though he has admitted that the case challenges what is known by psychiatrists. The most prevalent theory is that Roberts suffered a protracted fugue state, triggered by a near-death experience or severe psychological trauma. This is when the brain is in an act of radical self-preservation, so it severs the connection to the autobiographical self to escape a threat. The threat being a corrupt sheriff's captain, the stress of the Green River killings, or a personal crisis exacerbated by alcohol use. This case also touches upon the amnesia defense, a legal phenomenon where individuals use memory loss to evade responsibility for past actions. Of course, Roberts had no criminal charges that she was avoiding. But the timing of her disappearance and what she did leading up to her disappearance, like her bank withdrawals and her pet abandonment, suggests that she was planning something that usually doesn't happen in spontaneous fugue states. There is a tension between her departure and the disorientation of her discovery. And that's the most puzzling part about the investigation. Looking back on the case now, the case of Jody Roberts is an example of the complexity of dissociative disorders. It shows how vulnerable human identity is and how easy a life can be rewritten. Roberts never recovered her memories of Tacoma. For her, that part of her existence remains dead. It's a story that's told to her by others. That woman that she was died in 1985, and the woman who emerged from the Colorado Mall was an entirely different person, bound by different memories, different passions, and different loves. Family that she left behind in Oregon was pleasantly shocked to discover her, but it's also been a source of ongoing grief. They found their daughter, but they did not find their Jody. For the city of Tacoma, she's a symbol of a turbulent era, a reporter who went so deep into the shadows that she eventually became one. The silence that followed her disappearance became a total erasure. She lost herself as a witness to a trauma that medicine could never recoup. The dual lives of Jody Roberts and Jane D. Williams are a haunting reminder that the memory of truth is often far more fragile than we dare to believe. Please subscribe to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Please like and share this video. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a member of this channel. I appreciate you considering that. You can also support me by continuing to watch and share my videos, and I do appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.